Good evening, good evening, good evening. Let me welcome you to this evening's presentation as you sit with me under the mango tree of Mango Tree Dialogues. I'm very happy that you've been able to join me. And I know that there are many other forums that you could be at. And even when you seek to listen to me, in the live on the recordings that are on this channel, because I see where, many of you, even though you're not probably able to join me personally on the program, you've been able to still go and visit with me and to share with the thoughts that I have expressed. And I really appreciate you doing that. And again, thanks for being with me under the mango tree this evening. All right. There are a number of issues that one would want to distill. There are so many things that are happening, not only in Jamaica, not only in the Caribbean, but in the entire world. Things are always happening, of course, but there are somehow things to be on a kind of dramatic pace. And not undue to the the kind of frenzy that we're seeing with the Trump administration with regard to tariffs and all the other things that are happening that are affecting, I think people are realizing more and more, what it really means. Sometimes we say glibly that when America sneezes, the rest of the world catches a cold. And I think we're beginning to see how this is not just something that is said glibly, but to the extent to which this manifests itself to be true, especially in these days, because the extent to which American power is disseminated throughout the world, and that has tremendous influence, whether it is what people call soft power, using diplomacy or aid, especially as we had it under the United States Agency of International Development, spreading peace throughout the world, but soft power, or whether it is even hard power, where America goes down into different parts of the world, like in, Vietnam, and we saw the sad outcome of that, and also in Iraq and Afghanistan and all those other places. But anyway, I don't want to get too deep into that. I just wanted to, reflect on how dramatic a pace, things seem to be going these days. And sometimes it's very difficult to keep up with it. And some people who try to find that the going is very rough and they get frustrated and, some get depressed. Some don't even bother at all because, they feel that there's nothing that they can do about what is taking place, so just leave well alone. All right. Before I even get into the subjects, I just want to say something about the summer because we are entering into the hot days. The hot days are already here. We're beginning to get some rains and so on in different parts of the Caribbean, in the United States, in Florida, for example, and in other areas. We've had some, serious weather concerns, but summer is not far off, and we're beginning to feel the intense heat. And what I really wanted to say here is to remind us that it is very important that we keep ourselves hydrated, which means, travel with your bottle of water and at different points, take a swig. I always make sure that I have a bottle of water in my vehicle, that if I pull up at the stoplight and so on, and sometimes I just automatically reach across and just grab it and mm, grab a swig. Whether I feel like it or not. It has been said that by the time you really feel thirsty and you want to drink water, your body is already dehydrated, and that is why you really dehydration leads to thirst. That's what I understand, from the, what I've read. But there's truth in that, I think. But whatever it is, please, as we get into the summer months, keep yourself hydrated. Having enough water in your body makes a lot of difference, not just to your well-being, how you feel, but to your overall health. And it doesn't take any repetition, and it's not a very difficult thing to accomplish. A lot of people end up in the hospital, and when they get there, they're sick because they have been dehydrated. Some perhaps even at the point of dying, because 70% of the body is water. And especially those people who are taking medications, which tend to dehydrate you further, you have to really keep on top of the water um, intakes into your body. So please, I just want to say that from the beginning here. I'm going to come back to it, I guess, in terms of a reminder from time to time. All right. There are two subjects I'd want to share with on this evening. The first, and I'm going to be concentrating my thoughts on Jamaica. But some of the things that I say here are certainly in these two things that I want to talk about, are not just Jamaican issues. They are international issues. They are issues of the human interactions, human beings interacting with each other in relationships and in governance. So I think these two subjects will have resonance right throughout the length and breadth of human societies. The first has to do with respecting the dignity of women. Respecting the dignity of a woman. And I will come into that soon, but just let me mention the other one that I want to talk about. The Supreme Court in Jamaica has ruled now on a lawsuit that was sent in to them by the People's National Party regarding the use of states of emergency as a crime-fighting measure or a crime-fighting tool. They have ruled against that action by the government, ruling as unconstitutional the repeated or the routine use of states of emergency in the crime-fighting effort. And there are a few things I want to say about that. I was hoping that I could say something on the Gaza situation too and what is happening down there, but I'm not sure we'll get into that. And that subject needs a little bit more treatment. You know that as a frequent listener to this podcast, I've many times talked about, what, from the very beginning, and predicted some of the things that are happening right now with regard to the genocide that is taking place down there. People, certainly the Israelis, don't regard it as genocide. But I find it very interesting that recently there are many soldiers now who are saying that their presence in the Gaza right now is not necessary. And some of them are, who were called up, some of the reservists are saying that they don't want to really be down there because they believe that the agenda has changed. What motivated the war in the first place is no longer what obtains now, that the agenda of Netanyahu, the Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, has shifted dramatically, and that they are now being used as pawns in a particular way. All right, but if I don't get to that, we will come back to it at some other point, because for a more fulsome treatment, it is abysmal, tears your heart apart to see what is happening down there with the starvation of these people, literally before our very eyes, and the impotence of the world in not being able to do something about this, sitting back and allowing thousands of children to be murdered. And that's what is happening. They're being murdered. And we can't call it anything other than that. But anyway, as I said, let's see where we go. All right. So the first thing on the agenda then is the respecting the dignity of our women. And this the consideration of this subject this evening arose from what has been happening recently in the last 2 weeks, especially in Jamaica. There are two incidents that stand out, but they are not unfamiliar incidents, meaning that these incidents that took place, let me just quickly name them. The savage, as it turned out, rape and murder of young Kelsey Ferrigan, 9-year-old girl. And then the road rage incident with that 65-year-old man accosting a nurse and beating her, stomping on her, and at one point, as it were, pulling a gun. And thank God she survived it. One has to really wonder what could be at the center of these incidents. What is the mindset? What is the psychology that drives this assault on the dignity of a woman? And right through, I mean, young Kelsey was just 9 years old, and we have had many other incidents where young girls have been murdered, have been killed, sexually assaulted and killed. And at that time, you'd think that the society was growing a bit inured to what was happening, that the society was getting numb. But thank God, there was an expression of outrage right across the society when young Kelsey was murdered in the horrible way, horrific way in which she was, disposed of by her attacker. It's heartening that the society is not numb, has not reached the point of numbness with regard to these incidents. And the same thing, with the beating of the nurse. Civil society groups came out. Her own professional group, of the nurses, came out in demonstration. And the society in general was outraged. But with these incidents happening ever so frequently, you can rest assured, sadly, that we're going to have other incidents like this. And so the question in the future, and so the question that has to be asked is, what can we do as a society to begin to not just focus attention, strong attention, because sometimes we just acknowledge these things and it becomes a 9-day wonder, as we know, and then we move on to the next subject. But to focus intense attention at this particular subject and to ask the very serious questions, to talk about these things. Why is it that our women, typically our women, men too, are assaulted? And there are many more who are assaulted than probably come out and report it and talk about it because it's a matter of shame, on the behalf of quite a number of men who are also assaulted. But we know that in the main, it is the women themselves who are the victims of the uh, assault on their dignity. And and so the question has to be asked, why is it that our men are moved to treat our women in the way that we do? What is the psychology behind it? I think the answer to that question is multifaceted. It is not something that you can just pull out of a hat and say that this is it and stamp it and say, well, let's do this. There are some who suggest that it is something that is well ingrained in our psychological past. Some who say that it came out of the plantocracy, out of the plantation experience of slavery, where our men were used, the men who were carried, of course, from Africa here and worked on the plantations, that they were used as mere studs on the plantation to propagate stock for the planters. And there are some who argue that what we are seeing even today is a part of a collective psychology, probably a Jungian, Jungian, we talked about collective personality, that has been passed down in their generations and that has stayed with us. And it is now part of the psyche of our men that we cannot look on women uh, outside of a lustful or outside of a desire to have them. Well, I don't know to what extent that theory or that explanation stands, but it's out there. I've heard it. As a matter of fact, it's strongly suggested by some people in terms of the psychology, the collective psychology of all men. But there's a sense in which we can use, to what extent we buy into this theory, we can use it as an excuse and to excuse the behavior that we see today being manifested. I personally do not buy into that, to say that it is one of the strong. I'm not saying there's not something to that theory. I'm not saying that there's not something to the notion that collectively we could be under that kind of influence because of what the past has been. But my God, I mean, slavery was abolished how long ago? And even, let's say, over the past 50 years, over the past 30 years, are we saying that our men, their minds are still shackled by the experience that they went through, that their forefathers went through and passed down whatever in some genetic way to them? That what we are seeing in the attack on this child and these children, these girls, young girls in our country, and the assault on our women, can love them for who they are, and we destroy them if we cannot get our way with them. Are we saying that this is a throwback to the past? I don't buy it. I don't buy it as a functional reason for what obtains today. A snippet of it might be there, who knows? But I don't think that that direct correlation can be made between the past and what is happening now. I really don't. I could be wrong. I've been wrong on many things before. But what is of greater importance right now is for us to ask our men, who are largely the ones who are carrying out these actions, what is it that lies behind your thinking outside of a severe mental illness that you can look on a woman, especially a woman to whom who gave herself to you in marriage, and you can demean her. You can say all kinds of things to her. you can treat her with scant regard. And eventually, when she does not go the way that you want her to go, you can set upon her and beat her, and in some instances, eventually kill her. What is happening there? We need to ask that question. And these things are not comfortable to talk about. The society doesn't talk about these things easily or readily. And because they're uncomfortable, they tend to be pushed under the carpet and brushed out through the door, and nobody contends with it. And yet it remains very persistent in our lives. I believe that at the center of this rabid assault on our women, I put it no stronger than that for now, if it can get any stronger, really, is the fact of the way in which we objectify our women for sexual pleasure. We look at their physicality, and even when we are married to them, we do not see them beyond any possibility other than being able to provide us with sexual pleasure. That they become objects to be exploited for our own sexual pleasure. I was listening to, it wasn't really a podcast, but there was something that I saw, and there's a news person. I don't quite recall the source now, and they were talking about this whole idea of, rape in marriage. And a number of young men were questioned, and one young man, when he was asked, what he thought of it, he said, well, if I'm married to her, she's mine. And whenever I want to have sex, she should be able to have sex with me. Now, if that is how he conducts his relationship, I cannot see it lasting. Two, at some point, I can see somebody like that thinking like that, setting upon his wife or his significant person in his life, and probably hurting her physically, because inevitably that kind of thinking tends towards violence. I must have my way because she's mine. She's not yours. You see, when we objectify women, we do not recognize their dignity. We believe that they are there to be exploited, to be used. We have not graduated to the point where we can look into ourselves and realize that the woman has her own mind, she has her own brain, she has her own way of thinking. In other words, she has what the scholars call autonomy, her own sense of who she is. She's not an automaton. She's not a robot. She's not somebody that you can help yourself with whenever you want. If she says no, it's no. We haven't gotten around to the whole idea where a woman in a relationship can tell us no, and we believe that ought to be so. Even if we keep quiet and don't do anything about it at the particular time, at the back of our minds, we still think that it is what you want. And whenever we cannot get our way, whenever we cannot sit down and talk to our women in a very respectable way, then if the woman at all should assert her sense of personhood, assert her sense of autonomy, the next thing that we do is to subdue them with violence and eventually, in many instances, take them out, kill them. So this is a conversation that we must have with our men, and we must ask the question, why is it that you think you have this authority over the woman as if she doesn't have her mind of her own? And if you cannot respect the dignity of her person and who she is as a person, you can rest assured that your relationship is not going to be going in any positive direction. As a matter of fact, it may be heading towards an abyss, a precipice. You know, since the coming of the internet, and I suspect now with the onset of AI technology, it would appear, and I don't have a study for this, but it would appear that the number of assaults on our women have increased. Yes, they used to be in the past, and killings and so on. But now it appears that it is on steroids. And I sometimes wonder to myself, what is it that gives rise to this sort of thing? And I sometimes put it at the foot of the internet, where people now have so much access to all kinds of pornography on the internet. And I don't know, this is something that the sociologists, anthropologists, and all the others who study these things have to really get into and disaggregate and find out what is happening there. But I would like to think that that more of our men are looking at these pornographic displays, seeing how women are degraded in these pictures and in these encounters. And then they themselves feel that perhaps they can carry out these kinds of behavior with their significant others. And so the objectification of women, the looking at women in a way for them providing you with sexual pleasure. I am trying to see if there is any correlation between the prevalence and the easy access that our men have to pornography on the internet and the displays of these horrible behavior towards our women. Can't see them for who they are, can't see them outside of an image of sexual gratification. I don't want to go too deeply into that. That won't allow me, but at the same time, it's just a theory. I know that there are some studies that have been done, and recently a study that was done in Jamaica found that among teenage boys, that the incidence of, what did the study say? Probably about 40%, I think it was, of the teenagers who were questioned, the boys who were questioned, have had access to pornography or use it routinely. And to the extent that that is so, to the extent that that is true, we are in for big trouble because the statistics could be more and it is easily available, everything. And when you look at those pictures, what it does to you, especially to the young mind, is to reorientate, recharacterize the mind, almost to the point of disfiguring the mind, so that when you see a woman or a girl, you just think that she's just an object. You cannot have a healthy relationship with that person outside of seeing her as an object of your desire. That is what the disfigurement of the mind does, the reorientation of your mind. And don't think that the internet doesn't do that. These pictures, they're very suggestive. They're beyond suggestive. And they take hold of your mind and bend you in a certain direction. So insofar as that study, and I'm just recalling the study now, or I would have done some more research into it and give you more precise information on it. But I couldn't say I was stunned really, but I was really distressed to hear that that is the case. And so, insofar as that is so, I can see that we are in for a rough ride in terms of the appreciation that we need to make of our women as worthy partners, to be respected, their dignity to be upheld. They're not just being seen as a package to be exploited, but persons to be respected. This is a conversation that the society must have. We must talk more about these things. Yes, it's good to have a sexual register of sex offenders and all those sort of things. And it's good to pass legislation and so on. But we need to get into the community and talk about these things. And that's how you're going to reach people. And that is how we're going to hopefully reorientate the minds of individuals, so that, again, outside of a severe mental illness, because some of these behaviors, you cannot help but think that they have to be committed by people who are severely mentally challenged. But some of it, and I perhaps would think most of it, or more of it, has to do with the evil intent of the mind that has been disfigured by its exposure to these images and intense preoccupation with and addiction to pornography. It is a conversation that the society has to have, and I would strongly suggest that the church must be a very integral part of this discussion. All right, so I'm going to leave it at that and hope that we may begin the conversation and that something will flow, so that we do not see more young Kelseys, or we do not see any other young woman, or any other woman for that matter, being battered, beaten, because they dare to drive on the road. That we don't see another woman being dragged and pulled and kicked and killed eventually, because she does not want, she expresses her own mind and does not want to be led by the mind of a tyrant. As they say, time has come, and let's do it. All right. The second thing that I want to talk about is the whole matter of the use of states of emergency as a crime fighting tool. If you have read my articles in the Jamaica Observer, you would have seen many references that I made to this whole idea of the government using states of emergency to fight crime. From the very beginning, I thought it was a bad idea. And my friends in the JLP, they say, Ralston, you really thought that? Well, you didn't read my writings. And why didn't, when it was first used, I had no problem with it. Because if you use it to go into a community that is experiencing a flare up of violence, and you need to get in there quickly and to suppress the violence, then that's a good use of a state of emergency. It might not be a national emergency, but nobody said, the Constitution doesn't say that, a state of emergency has to be declared across the entire nation. It can be applied to sections of the nation that are under threat and that pose a threat to the rest of the society. So I had no problem with the government using a state of emergency to go inside there to quell any flare up of violence as happened on that occasion. But then another flare up somewhere else and you hear about another state of emergency. Another flare up somewhere else and you hear about another state of emergency. And so you begin to think, but hold on. What's going on here? What's going on here? And I ask myself the question and express it in some of these articles. Does the government have the constitutional right, or does the Constitution itself allows for this, routine, because it has now become routine by that time, use of this tool in this way to fight crime? And one of the arguments that the government gives in supporting and those who support the use of states of emergency is that it really does reduce crime and is very important in their tool. It has been one of the things that has been instrumental in bringing crime down to historic levels, especially over the last year into this year. I'll come back to that because I don't know if the direct link has been made with that. But I was bothered. And some people call me PNP because that's the position that the PNP has taken from day one too, for their own reason. And when you do public commentary, you can't help it sometimes when people put you on either side. That has been my bane. That has been part and the warp and wolf of my existence in the past 40 or almost 50 years. I've been writing public commentary. I've been seen as JLP, I've been seen as PNP. So those who want to see me now as PNP because I am defending my position. I didn't even know that the PNP had taken that position when I first came up. But anyway, the fact that you're branded on both sides must say that you're doing something right. And that's all right. It comes with the territory. What can I say? But I sense that from my limited knowledge of what a state of emergency is, and that understanding is that a state of emergency must be used sparingly. A state of emergency is employed by any country in the world. If you go and you talk about a state of emergency, the very first thing that comes to the mind is that a state of emergency is applied in a country where the country is under very serious existential threats either from invasion from another country, an army from another country, that's a very serious threat, a natural catastrophe like an earthquake, probably affecting 70-80% of the country, damaging infrastructure and so on, or there is an uprising in the country itself where people are now pose a threat to this to order and the stability of the country. Those are the ways in which I've always thought that, and I think the world thinks that states of emergency are to be applied, not to routinely contain crime in particular districts or particular areas of the country. And so, you know, the argument that it does suppress crime, yes. If there is an uproar in Prattville, Manchester, let's say, and there are lots of gunmen, you see them and they're really almost taking over the community like Haiti, the gangs have taken over Haiti, parts of Haiti. Then certainly you have to go inside there, and once you go inside there under a state of emergency, you go in with overwhelming force to suppress and to arrest and to, do what the security forces have to do to contain a situation like that. Yes, you have to do that. But does what is happening there pose that existential threat to the rest of Jamaica? They say, the government argues that the fact that we have had how many, 1,000 people being killed, an average of 1,000 people being killed at least over the past 20, 30 years is an emergency. That is a specious argument. So you want to tell me that from the 800 that were killed in 1980 down to the present time, so we had a national emergency existing from 1980 when over 800 people were slaughtered in the political miasma of that time, and down to the present time. You're going to say that, boy, we've had a situation requiring a states of emergency all down through that time. Yes, I remember that during the PNP time under Michael Manley, they came up with the Suppression of Crime Act, where the police were able to almost go and kick down doors and act in a very arbitrary, unconstitutional manner. And that act had to be repealed. I mean, I was remember that. And so you come down now and you say that, hey, we can now continue the use of these things. To me, that is a travesty of what the notion or the universally accepted definition of a state of emergency is. What's going to happen when you really need one? Because you're dishing out states of emergency as if you're throwing confetti. That doesn't make sense. And so the Supreme Court, in its wisdom, and in my own thinking, and I'm in a sense glad that this lawsuit was made by the PNP. They had their own a different agenda, but it served the country well in giving the courts an opportunity to look at the matter and to settle in their minds, what the real thinking ought to be. And I'm very happy that they have spent time to, I think, about 40 pages of the ruling to talk about precisely what that state of emergency is, and how the government's application of it in a routine way to contain crime, why they ruled that to be unconstitutional. I am not surprised by the decision. It comports with my own thinking from I would say from the very beginning, that something is wrong here, that is not a state of emergency to be using it routinely to fight crime. Because you know I'm very strong on this, friends. A state of emergency, is something very serious. A state of emergency is not something you just apply in a country. And the frequency with which we have had these just is a violation, in my view, of what the real thing ought to be about. And when we treat a state of emergency in this fashion, what we are doing is denigrating the essence of what a state of emergency really is. So that when the time comes when we really need it, people are just going to say, oh, no, a state of emergency. They don't even probably remember what a definition of it is anymore because they have been exposed to it in these willy-nilly fashions for too long. And so you end up being the boy that cried wolf. That is my concern. It's not about hitting the government. The government gets things wrong too. The government doesn't always have it right. They think that because they govern, of course, that they always get it right. But we, the citizens, have to tell them, we have to let them know that no, that can't be right. And I'm glad that the Supreme Court ruled the way they did in distilling the matter and hopefully easing people's minds. And, the government is not really without tools, to do the suppression of crime. Because the only thing that the state of emergency gives the government is that it's able to go in and just people's human rights are suspended because there's a state of emergency there. And, so certain rights that existed are suspended and people can be arrested and you want to arrest the gang members and arrest people, very quickly. Take them out, take them off the streets, put them in detention. But doesn't the same thing obtain in a curfew? If there's a flare up of violence in a particular area and you drop a curfew on that area, that people cannot go out and in without the security forces giving permission. So you're able to bottle in the violence producers inside that community, and then you work your way through and find them, arrest them, detain them. You have that power right now. But I say something else. I don't know how many people have heard about the Enhanced Security Measures Act, ESMA. This act has been going through the parliament. In fact, it has been languishing inside there. And what it is intended to do in the nitty-gritty is to give the security forces more enhanced powers. Not as strong as those under a state of emergency, but somewhat akin to those powers. More enhanced than just a curfew. That they can go in these communities and almost do precisely what the state of emergency allows them to do. But they have been playing, just like what I said last week with the Jamaica Teaching Council, they have been playing political football with this. I don't know why politicians just use important matters of national concern as political football. This act, which would give the security forces what they need, the tool that they need, so that you don't have to use state of emergency as a caption. You can use the enhanced security measures that you're given and accomplish almost the same thing. Why not move the act through the parliament and get it signed by the king's representative in Jamaica, the GG? And I say that deliberately just to remind us that constitutional, the constitutional reform is alive. Why don't they move with more alacrity to get this in place and spare us the travesty that is being perpetrated right now of using states of emergency. It doesn't look good on the government. It doesn't look good, Mr. Honis. Oh, Dr. Honis, sorry. That your government is persisting in the use of these methods. And even when the Supreme Court has ruled, your government has said that you are going to challenge it. I don't know if you've filed, if the government has filed already to, challenge the judgment of the learned justices. But I would like to predict, and you heard it here first, that even if it goes to the Privy Council, to the King's Council, again, constitutional reform, even if it goes there, the government will not prevail. You heard it here for the first time. I am predicting that even if the government gets it to the Privy Council, the ruling will not be any different from the Supreme Court. And I believe that in pursuing this, the government is pursuing a fool's errand. You're digging a hole out of which you might not be able to climb. And you would be well advised to ask somebody to put a ladder down in that hole and climb out. Swallow a little dose of humility and climb out. Because you will not win in this particular matter. I cannot see any sensible jurisdiction like the law lords agreeing that the routine use of states of emergency to fight crime is constitutional. That's not what the Constitution asks for. And the sooner this is understood, I think the better off the government will be and the people of Jamaica will be. Move with the ESMA, the Enhanced Security Measures Act, to get that in place. You're doing a good job so far. Some people talk about, let me just quickly say this as it has come to my mind. Some people make the claim that there is, that the historic levels in the fall of crime has been due to the states of emergency. How do you know that? I hear of a study that has been done to make that connection. But I find it a little specious to suggest that out of the potpourri, yes, my daughter reminded me that that is how it is pronounced, Daddy, not potpourri. Out of the potpourri of suggestions, of factors that have really helped in the tamping down of the crime situation, we can now just highlight the state of emergency as being the ascendant or being at the apex of this, or being a significant part of this. I believe that there are three things that have been more responsible for the reduction in the historical reduction in the crime rate that we're experiencing and happy for now than perhaps even the state of emergency. It has helped. Yes, because you suppress the crime and you're able to do certain things. It has helped. It has helped to take off some of the gang leaders off the road and so on. Yes, I know, I agree with that. But I believe that even more, perhaps even more important, is the fact that the intelligence gathering capacity of the force has been, you know, strongly increased. Thanks again to the government, thanks to the Minister of National Security. He has done very well in seeing to it that the men and women have the capacity to enhance their intelligence gathering apparatus. They have been given that help, and it is paying off. Nowadays, young people don't even want to be called dons, because once you're a don, you're a target coming for you, right? They're on top of it. As you hear about a killing, boom, they're able to, you hear about an arrest. And sometimes they are foolish enough to engage the police in gun battles and, the rest of it. They are pronounced dead on the arrival at hospital. That is the mantra. So that's one. Increase surveillance capacity. The second thing is the mobility of the force and more boots on the ground. More police have been added to the JCF and more are being trained to be added. But the fleet of the JCF has been increased. Billions of dollars have been poured into it by the government. And then I would, with these factors, there is and good leadership, starting with Anthony Anderson when he was Commissioner of Police, Major General, and now Dr. Kevin Blake. You can see that a coalescence of all of these factors are instrumental now in improving the morale of the force, and people are happier doing their work because they see results and they see the people behind them. These are the things that have been responsible for the reduction in the crime. So to say that a state of emergency has been, that the states of emergency are instrumental, yes, they play a part, but not necessarily a fundamental, significant correlation as distinct from the other measures, factors that I just mentioned. So let us not, in trying to justify the use of these emergency powers, use it as a kind of cloak to justify why you use them, when there are other factors that you're not even perhaps looking at, and which you should rejoice in, because this government under the JLP, more than any other in recent times, has spent the money. They have really given the support to the police that they need. And it is paying off. And we rejoice and we are glad that it's paying off. So we don't need to have the state of emergency as a crime fighting tool. Again, get the ESMA going and let us see where that takes us. All right, Gaza and Netanyahu and what is happening over there, we'll have to wait until another episode, another presentation. But I'm really concerned about the way in which we treat our women. All of us. There are almost 8 billion people in the world. All of us have come into the world through a woman, a mother. And we have sisters. We have aunts, grandmas, and all the rest of it. Let's treat them with dignity. Let us, as we fight crime, don't lose a sense of proportion as to the things that work. Because in the end, the things that work are community-based. People in the communities now are giving information to the police because they feel more emboldened themselves to be able to pass this information on. And that's how it has to be, because these criminals have to come back home to somewhere the arms of their girlfriends, in the arms of their wives, perhaps in the arms of their mothers. And something good is happening. So let's not waste it. All right. I have to leave it there this evening. It's just left for me now to thank you for joining me. And remember, friends, that yeah, I can see that a lot of people might be able to get on and because we are all busy people, I understand, but the episode is up live on my YouTube channel, Mango Tree Dialogues. And so you go there and you listen at your own leisure. And in between drinking your favorite beverage and relaxing, you can just listen, just turn the TV on, put Mango Tree Dialogues in and watch other episodes as well. And when you do, just share it with somebody else. And if you like what I'm saying, which I think you do, I'm presumptuous enough to think that, just give me a like. But most importantly, subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. Just like I'm in real estate, location, location, location. In these, social media spaces, at least for YouTube, it is subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. And let me be a part of the family, be a part of the growing, joining me under the mango tree. The mango tree is bearing very well. Well, not very well this year, I must say, but there are quite a few big ones on it. And I shall enjoy some of them. Got to be very careful the older you get. You don't oversubscribe for diabetes. But anyway, um, that is what it is. So go there, subscribe, and let us keep this thing going. Okay, this is not about any personal thing. I think that people who have read me over the years and hear me talk are right about Jamaica. Is just because I love Jamaica. I do it because of Jamaica. Even if I'm not living in the country, I do it because Jamaica made me who I am, gave me a sense of being, and I'm not going to forget the rock from which I've been hewn, nor the ground from which I've been dug. Too many people do that. Not Ralston them mad. It ain't gonna happen. And I do it significantly because I love people. I want to see the best for them. No personal agenda. If there's any agenda at all, it's love of people and love of country. All right. So having said that, then let me wish you all the very best for the evening, and whatever you do, walk good. Good night.